You're listening to Coffee and Culture. We're on Talk 1260 and 103.7 KTRC. We stream at santafe.com when it's live, which is just after 2 on Saturdays and Sundays. My name is Matthew Chase Daniel, and I'm your host every other week. And today I'm talking with Kaela Waldstein, and she is a filmmaker, videographer, producer, does a lot of work in film and documentary work. And I've seen you around. I don't know you well, but we've met, and I've seen your work. And every time I see a new project that you're working on, I'm like, wow, that's great. She's now working with this person and with this person. A lot of local indigenous artists, but also sort of a broad spectrum. So we're going to talk about that and your work and how you got into it. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me in the comfort of your living room here.
Yeah. So you're saying you came here without having done a lot of video production and shooting and that art form, but with the determination to do that here. Where'd you come from, and where'd you learn, and what brought you here?
Yeah, well, I was born and raised in the city of San Francisco, and I've lived different places, but I happened to be living there right before I moved here. And I actually worked in the natural foods industry for 12 years prior to becoming a filmmaker. Mm-hmm. And I had just made like a few films with like some friends, and like my first documentary that I did just all on my own was on my dad, like his post-retirement life, because it was safe subject matter. I didn't have to worry about how I was coming off to my dad when I was like essentially bossing him around the kitchen. So I had enough savings from since I graduated college to like invest in a camera, some, basic sound equipment, take care of my basic living expenses, like a year's worth, right? So I was like, let me just hit the ground running, hustle my ass off, just again, so I don't have any regrets for not trying my very best. And so...
And when was this? How many years ago?
This was April of 2017 I moved here. And so it was an amazing time for me because I just had this creative freedom I just filmed whatever I wanted and like made short videos to build out my portfolio. And that was videos like on some of the biggest festivals we have here. I just brought my camera to Indian Market and got a media pass from them just to say, I want to make a video for you guys. You don't have to buy it. There's no obligation. I'll just show it to you when I'm done and you can decide. And they were actually my first like paid gig. Yeah.
Nice.
And yeah, so I kind of did that over and over. And I just remember like waking up with a real sense of purpose and enthusiasm because there was just so much opportunity here creatively of things that inspired me that those first several months were just me going out in what this filmmaker's paradise of like beautiful landscape, beautiful art, culture, and that is kind of how I begun this journey where I am now. I now feel like an established filmmaker whose niche is arts and culture, doing exactly what I want because I leveraged those early videos, which were exactly what I wanted to be doing.
That's wonderful. And you seem to have, I mean, I'm sure one thing leads to another, but you're working with a lot of local indigenous artists, which is not, as an outsider, not necessarily an easy thing. Have entree or have those connections and that trust. And I assume that's just from one to the next. That it builds.
It did start with that first video with Indian Market. And, when you're an outsider working with indigenous communities, it's appropriate to wait to be asked to be invited in or like to, be approached by them, not to, but I really did have to do that first initial knocking on the door to say I was interested and wanted to contribute something. And then once people saw that work, that led to me working with Amber Dawn Barobe, who is the producer of their Indigenous fashion show,
Right.
who hired me to cover the Indian Market Fashion Show, which is like their biggest, like flagship, most popular event.
Right.
And then when people saw me working with Amber Dawn, they're like, "Wow,
If
Amber
you're
Dawn
doing
trusts
that,
you."
right.
If Amber Dawn trusts you, who, I feel like she's a tough cookie. I don't know.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, she's been on this show.
yeah, she's
Right
like
after she left Indian Market,
Yeah.
Swaya, and started her own thing a year or two ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's just so very serious about what she does, very opinionated, very no BS. Like, so it definitely was a privilege. And I think, like you said, one thing led to another. And as people are like, oh, you've worked with that artist? You must be all right. And then, as time has gone on, I feel like I've been really embraced by the Indigenous community. And because it is such an intimate experience,
Yeah.
just interviewing people and getting straight to those personal questions, I've developed like a lot of real friendships
Right.
that have kind of kept me in that sphere. So I'm just like so grateful to keep getting invited back again and again. And I mean, living here, I've kind of had to be able to do just about anything and everything. So I have expanded beyond that. But I just kind of go where the wind takes me.
But it's mostly art.
Yes, it seems to be that way. Or something socially responsible. Mm-hmm. I've been very fortunate that I've attracted projects that interest me, like the vast majority of them, to the point where that is how I'm able to make it or feel like it's my own artistic process, because I'm inspired by it. I'm often given the creative freedom to just run with it. And so, because it's something I feel personally connected to, I feel like it makes the work feel all the more organic.
Right.
And have that magic to it. And I have to say, that is one of the advantages of being an outsider. And with any subject matter, really, is that I get to come in with these fresh eyes and this curiosity that when I'm asking people a question, like an interview question, I genuinely, want to know. It's part of my learning process. Whereas somebody who might be more familiar with it and familiar with the people, they might be asking something
as a prompt, and they already know the answer.
Yeah, and it's a certain space you're creating, and then the person might respond. It's as if like they know the person already knows the answer, so they're reciting something, just for example, and that goes for any subject matter.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like moving to New Mexico was very inspiring in terms of these fresh eyes that you're seeing, and as an outsider. That everything, and I find that as like taking photographs of nature or whatever. Like you go to Iceland or Brazil or somewhere far away where everything's different, and you see it all amazingly fresh. And when you walk around in this place you've lived for 30 or 40 years, you've already seen a lot of it, and it's hard to see it with those fresh eyes.
Exactly.
And that's an interesting thing. And it's nice because I know people. My son works in film stuff in LA, and I know other people who work in film, and it's interesting in that, like normally, like a painter or a sculptor, like they're in their studio often by themselves, doing their creative process, and then they, finish it and deliver it and share it. And filmmaking is often a collaboration between 10 or 20 or 1,000 different people on set doing films, and you sort of combine the two, as you were talking about before, doing this mostly self-taught and mostly doing it by yourself. You don't have a sound person with a boom and all of those different things, and yet it comes across very professional and intimate. And I think, as you were saying, the intimacy is there because you don't have the crew, and that's always a tricky thing. I often see documentary films and you're in some remote location trekking through the jungle or whatever, and it's as if the film crew isn't there, and it's this thing that's the standard in documentary film is like make the filmmaker invisible. That if you know how films are made, it's very disingenuous and often feels like, well, this isn't really a documentary. This is something that somebody's created. Whereas when you're doing this all by yourself, there's no one invisible person behind the camera or whatever. You're back listening to Coffee and Culture. We're at Talk 1260 and 103.7 KTRC, streaming at santafe.com. And then all the shows are up as podcasts. You can find it on Spotify or Amazon or Apple or wherever you find podcasts. Look for Coffee and Culture with Matthew Chase Daniel. I am Matthew Chase Daniel. I'm your host every other week, and I'm talking with Kaela Waldstein about video storytelling as a high art form. I'm back with Kaela Waldstein. Before the break, we were talking about how appropriate it is for the filmmaker to be visible or not visible in the finished product.
Especially as a non-native filmmaker working with indigenous
Yeah.
folks, it's all the more important that I decenter myself. And so I think it really is important for if people notice me in there at all, like I'm not doing it right as far as I'm concerned.
You don't want to be noticed.
No, I don't. No, I don't want to be noticed. But I mean, even that is like disingenuous, though, to say like, oh, I'm not a part of this process at all, because that's absolutely not true. I mean, I see it more as me facilitating a process, helping people to tell their stories.
Right.
You know, when people say, you know, that they tell the stories or they refer to somebody else, another filmmaker is, you know, they tell the stories of this whatever community or subject. And I'm like, that is not, that is not the appropriate way to think about it.
You want them people to tell their own stories.
Yeah, because I talk about this being my artistic process,
right,
as well as like my profession, but it's not really about self-expression. It's about helping other people express themselves and me distilling it down and presenting it to the audience in the most relatable, connecting kind of way, nuanced. You know, it's the human element is central to my work, and humanity is a complex thing.
Do you work back and forth, like after you shoot and put a rough edit together, you show it to the people, and they're like, I don't want you to have me say this, or I wanted to say this, or
so it's interesting, you know, what you said about it being a collaborative process with video, whereas other art forms are very solo, but video is both. In the beginning, you know, I'm meeting with the client, and you know, I have worked with a lot of artists, but usually the client is maybe a school like the Institute of American Indian Arts or SWAIA or whoever, and we're just talking about, you know, what is the goal of the videos, you know, who are the artists, what is the message, you know,
where are we going to show this and why?
Yeah, making sure I understand what it is, you know, they want, and then typically I run with it. And I do my thing, and I work with the artists and the people involved, and in accordance with, you know, those initial goals. And so I go in with the basic framework, and I just, you know, sometimes as simple as beginning, middle, end. How did you get started? What are you doing now? Where do you want to go? And then I kind of let it all fill in organically. I ask all the questions related to that stuff. Sometimes those questions take us to other places. But then the solo part comes in the editing room. You know, it's like I've gathered all my materials, and then I start to assemble them and kind of help paint the picture of everything I've gathered.
And when you're gathering those like archival photographs and stuff, you're talking at the Huntington or the Library of Congress, is that usually coming after the filmmaking with the individual?
Yeah, we call that B-roll. I would consider even archival material on top of, for example, footage of artists' process in the process of creating something, and I use
Right.
that to layer over that interview and all those hundreds of edit points I've made.
Right. Because your audio, and maybe this is not true, but my impression is what we're hearing in your films is mostly the artist speaking about their work or other
Yeah.
people speaking about that artist's work. And there's music and other things. But at times we see the artist speaking about their work. And then you're cutting to that B-roll, as you say, whether it's them creating their work or
Yeah.
the archival stuff.
Yeah.
But the through line is that narrative of the artist.
Yeah. Well, and like when I say art is a gateway to talk about deeper issues and larger issues, it means it can be kind of like a complex interweaving of things. And so I feel like I'm taking all this material I've gathered that could be, it's just like all over the place. And I'm basically making a picture with that.
Right.
It's almost like, those things you see in some films or documentaries or ads where it's just like a bunch of individual photos and from a few to hundreds to thousands, and
Right.
then you zoom out and it becomes like one image,
one face or something. Right.
Yeah, that's kind of something that's
Right.
coming to mind right now. But yeah, and so I will put together a cut. I will start with the interview and get the narrative down, the voiceover. And from there, I'll be like, okay, what imagery do I need to accompany this?
Right.
And that's where all that B-roll I shot and the archival imagery comes in. And I get it as close to perfect as I can. Something that's up to my standards, and then I'll share it with my inner circle of people whose feedback I value.
Right.
And then usually, I'll send it to the client. And there's usually a couple rounds of revisions.
Right.
But it's rarely them saying, "Oh no, that's
not at all what we want."
yeah." It's usually not too extensive, the revisions,
Right. And the client, you have sort of two different clients. One is who's funding it, IAI or whatever, and then the artist that it's about. So is that you're working with both of them on that, or is that ever
yes.
a difficult?
Well, especially, yeah, it's especially important when working with indigenous artists, any farmers, like I've said, I've kind of worked across the board,
Right.
but it's important that they have the chance to give feedback, make sure they feel represented,
Right.
properly and appropriately, make sure I got all the facts right.
Yeah.
And there's not always that opportunity in a lot of, especially more commercial projects or, I don't know, documentaries maybe in general, their timeline doesn't even account for that opportunity for people to give feedback. So.
Right. I was watching something yesterday, and some guy with some willow or reeds, and he was stripping them and talking about how maybe his mother or his grandmother taught him this way, and it was this weird wooden triangular press that he was pulling the stuff through. It was just beautiful. And I don't know, is that a fascination for you, the technical part of art making?
Yeah. Well, yes. I love those kinds of movements of somebody stripping bark. And, when I edit it, it's almost like a dance that, from one shot to the next, these fluid movements that I kind of want to highlight. It's the sounds of stripping that bark. It's the textures, any art form that involves textures and contrast, or I find visually fascinating, like eye candy, but that is part of the craft, like what you're mentioning about, was it concrete pipes or something in India? Everything has a story, and it's about honing in, on those layers. Even concrete, it can be an intimate peeling of layers when you look at the stories of the people involved in their craft, for example. So even things that aren't art are processes that I like to highlight that can be visually compelling. Like, for example, I'm working on kind of like my dream project in a way, like the kind of thing I envisioned when I first worked here of like what I wanted to do. That's what I aspired to do. So I got contracted by the Department of Cultural Affairs to do, it's a total of like 9 videos for 9 of their 20 divisions. But one of those is like the Office of Archaeological Studies.
Yeah.
And so like I got to go out to Fort Stanton, which is a few hours south of Santa Fe, and which is like a German internment camp formerly, and just watch these archaeologists out in the fields for arrowheads, and like that process of, taking a shovel and digging out the dirt, throwing it into sifters, shaking the sifters, like discovering an arrowhead, putting that arrowhead in their hand, showing it to their, like every step of that process to me is visually and conceptually compelling.
Yeah.
And then, there's the whole story of like what drives these people like to have wanted to pursue this line of work.
Right.
Like what makes them passionate. I mean, it's kind of the same approach even to artists.
Yeah. You're back listening to Coffee and Culture. I'm talking with Kaela Waldstein. We're talking, maybe talk a little bit more about the process of working with, say, the Office of Archaeology or things like that.
The kind of questions like I asked with the executive director of the office was like, what, what do people think this office does? And what do you actually do? Because the whole concept is to kind of open people's minds to like the breadth and the scope of what this office actually does, but also just like the core foundational concept of archaeology itself. Why is it important? And what makes New Mexico unique?
Right.
And why care?
Right.
And that led to conversations about, descendant communities here. Like Pueblo communities are one of the few, this is one of the few places where the tribes are living on their ancestral lands.
Yeah.
Like the 1680 Pueblo Revolt, like they really, wow, like were successful in holding on to, there's a lot more to the story, but, talking about archaeology from that perspective and the connection that these communities have to these anthropological sites and resources, there's a very direct connection that I think people can appreciate and be intrigued by. And with any project, that's where you want to go, is what makes something unique and special and dear to people. And that's where you're going to find the emotional resonance. Because the tagline of my company is like Mountain Mover Media, films of high production value with emotional resonance. Mm-hmm. So,
Right.
And one of the reasons high production value is important to me is like it's doing justice to these art forms, these even forms of science. It's a form of elevation to be able to compose them, visually and conceptually in a way that is very thoughtful and fine-tuned and almost otherworldly in a sense. Like that's what cinema is. Documentaries to me are cinematic art. It's not just documentation.
Yes.
You want to transport people like into a way of imagining things.
Well, and the world has changed where people consume a lot of their information and emotional content from video that wasn't true 20 or 30 or 100 years ago.
Yeah. So part of the craft is also how to hold people's attention.
Yeah.
Because it is pretty short. And so I'm also like writing is my first craft. And so just editing is something I bring into it. So I'm like very mindful of not being redundant, not being cliche, having a certain rhythm that is, not wasting a breath.
Every piece in there has to contribute to what you're doing.
Yeah. If it goes by faster than people realize, like that's a good indication.
Yeah.
Soundtrack is super important, more than people realize, I think.
I saw something maybe in one of your reels on your website or something. It was a vertical thing made for Instagram or TikTok or something, I assume, right? So is that a welcome thing, a frustrating thing? Like you have to shoot everything differently, or you shoot and you crop stuff down, or...
I shoot everything horizontal, like the 16:9 aspect ratio, and I will adapt it to vertical. I don't really think much while I'm shooting about the vertical aspect. Like beyond, I'm like, I should keep these shots wide because when they're close up.
Right.
But it's just like one of those necessary things. I'm just like, ugh, God, I got to think in vertical terms. Like, so that's not how the human eye even views the world. This is so stupid. But like, as an art form.
Right.
Like,
and why did it happen? I mean, people can turn their phones sideways and watch something horizontal.
I know, because that is the extent of, that's how bad things have gotten in terms of like attention span, and anything requiring an additional step is another opportunity to lose somebody.
Because the phone is inherently a vertical thing.
And it's a way to capture people's attention because it takes up
the
whole screen,
Right.
mean,
So this is all just due to some programmer at Instagram 15 years ago who decided to make it vertical.
That were analyzed, and things that are vertical get more engagement, and it's all about engagement. And so I'm like, yeah, okay, I'll do it. I can do it. Like, and I do. Sometimes I will just keep it sideways I'll keep the video horizontal. I won't adapt it to vertical, and I'll just post the video sideways. So you have to turn your phone.
Yeah.
And, So, it's like I work within an industry, and it is a business, and it's like I have to adapt sometimes. And I'm giving clients what they want ultimately.
Right. If they're making something that's going on Instagram, vertical is a better way than if they're making something to go on YouTube, in which case it can be a horizontal.
So it takes some extra work to keyframe that, editors will know what I mean by that, but it's like you kind of have to manually pan left and right to get to the other side of that screen that is being cut off because it's vertical, if that makes sense. So I make it work.
Yeah. And we talked about this maybe a little earlier, but working in photography as well as video, but more recently, you started doing a series of self-portraits.
Yeah, that was like December 2024, January 2025, where I just did a series of self-portraits in my living room to teach myself studio photography, because I think part of it was that just habit of working alone, and more just not wanting to inconvenience anybody else, like with hanging out while I have this learning process where it takes me hours to like take one photo of myself. Ridiculously inconvenient because
you don't get to look through the camera while you're shooting.
And it's just every time I want to make an adjustment, I have to get up and then like shift the light and then sit back down and redo the focus, and it's super frustrating. But like, and so I lost count of how many portraits I came out of that with, but I tried to challenge myself technically with each one. But it was kind of like editorial quality portraits. But while I was doing that, I had a lot of fun with it, but it also became like a way of expressing myself and all my different sides, and like yeah.
Did
Anyway,
you show that to people, or is that?
yeah, and I posted them to social media, like in my
Uh-huh.
stories as I was making them, and people responded really well to it
Mm-hmm.
because there was a certain vulnerability that came through that. There was fun. There was like, for example, what are some of the ones I did? I had one called Sporty Spice where I got to show off my wardrobe a little bit, like my vintage Adidas jacket with like, it put my mustard yellow hoodie under that with like burgundy leggings and yellow shoelaces and my black sneakers, and like did like a very athletic pose with a yellow background. And so it's like a part of myself I'm very proud of. It's like that athletic kind of can do,
Right.
confident part of myself.
Nice.
But then towards the end, when I was playing more with exposure and doing just a silhouette of myself, like I posed as Venus in the shell, and I was straight up naked.
Right.
Nobody would know because all you saw, well,
Was
they
a
would
silhouette,
know.
right.
Yeah. I mean, they would know, but they just didn't get to see the details of that. But I posed, I mean, it's a very like feminine, vulnerable pose. And that's got to be one of my most popular of that series.
Yeah.
I had a fan where I was blowing my hair, so I almost didn't post it. My good friend encouraged me to, and people respond to vulnerability.
Yeah.
Most anything. And so that is encouraging to me. But yeah, so from there, then I started taking other people's portraits and headshots. People, but by posting on social media, people caught on and asked me if I could do theirs, and now I'm getting booked for like events, and word has gotten out.
I assume it's a very different process than putting together a film.
Oh man,
Is it a relief and easy?
I love it. Yeah, because it's one single frame. I mean, you're having to sift through, hundreds sometimes to find the
Right.
best one, but it's a lot of work to craft a story, curate all those sound bites, do that whole mosaic process in the editing, like collage, like it's a lot. And,
Right.
and with photography, I just have to choose one image. And that one single image has so much more data in it than a still from video. I'm not having to worry about motion blur or anything. It's sharper. The colors just have more range. I get to play with it. There's a lot more leeway in that post process.
Are you using the same camera you used for film?
Yes, I'm using my B camera, which is my Canon R5C, which takes both photo and video.
Right.
I use a cinema camera as my primary camera for video, but and you can physically print it. You can put it on a wall. You could have it in a gallery, like a show. It's like I was like, there's actually more opportunity here for me. I haven't really explored that route yet, but eventually, yeah, I'd like to be part of a group show or something. And
Right. And you were on a work on the cover of the Pasatiempo here in Santa Fe recently.
Oh yeah, that was kind of a milestone for me. So it's just one of those, one thing leads to another. I get most of my work through word of mouth these days, and the wife of Steve Graham, who's currently the director of the New Mexico Film Office, found me through him, because before he was director, he hired me for some behind the scenes of some productions that were in town, like SpongeBob SquarePants and for example, and I met him at a networking event at some point,
Right.
But she's the editor for Pasatiempo, which is the arts and entertainment magazine, the insert within the city of New Mexico.
Carolyn Graham.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
so she's hired me for a couple things, and it was for Electric Playhouse down in Albuquerque. They have an Alice in Wonderland themed dining experience where they just project these scenes onto the walls, like I guess these LED screens, and makes you feel like you're immersed in the world of Alice in Wonderland while they bring you these whimsical dishes. And I just captured the faces of people as they were experiencing it, the room itself.
Right, and they're all lit in this colored light. Is that right? Somewhat?
Yeah, actually, the room was pretty dark. They were kind of more in shadow, and like
I see.
the walls were really illuminated. But again, the advantage of still photography, it has so much more data in it to play with that I was able to, in Adobe Lightroom, just isolate people's faces or bodies and amp up the exposure.
Right.
And so you wouldn't know how dark the room is.
Yeah.
That was a lot of work because every photo required
A lot of post. Yeah, to fix it in post.
Yeah, photographers would, understand about like you've got
Yeah.
to shoot at a super high ISO, but then you got noise, and then you got to reduce that noise, which if it can't be as sharp. So, yeah.
Yeah.
I love geeking out about this
I
stuff.
understand all that, those words.
But yeah, so I got the cover. I got to shoot an image for the cover, which ultimately they chose a almost kind of mugshot of the rabbit, a person wearing the rabbit costume. There was a couple characters that,
They mill about.
Yeah, there was the rabbit kind of welcomed people and ushered them into the room, and then there was the Mad Hatter character who was the host of the event that kind of
Fun.
entertained people while they're so.
Sounds like you end up immersed in all sorts of worlds.
It's freaking awesome. I love
Yeah.
what I get to do.
Yeah. You're working on a thing with Rashawn Ahmad and Vital Spaces.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. Well, I'm doing my first feature. Rashawn Ahmad is a local DJ / MC and community leader, originally from Oakland. But he's the executive director of Vital Spaces, which serves primarily people of color artists, getting them access to resources, space, just support for being artists when support can be hard to find. And I'm still figuring out how to make this into a really condensed, easy to explain thing for people, because it's
because you're in the middle of making it. So
well, it can just go in so many different directions. But essentially, how it started is one day I just asked Rashawn, because I didn't have a personal project I was working on. Long story short, and I'm like, well, what does the community want? Like, I don't have my own. I don't know. And I asked him, like, is there a documentary you would like to see, or do you have general thoughts on this? Because he's at the center of the art scene here. Like, if anybody would know, it would be him. And he said, this is like a Facebook Messenger. He's like, oh my God, are you reading my thoughts? Because like, I've been thinking about this. I just don't know how to do it.
Right.
And so we met a few times, and I just heard his story and what he's up to. And in the process, like, ideas were coming to mind about what would this documentary be like? What is the essential message? Because he does so much, the arts community does so much, and ultimately it came down to connecting his work as a DJ and an MC with his role as a community leader, which is let me think of how to say this. It's like the importance of art in turbulent times, alongside activism and direct action, but the importance of the arts and the role in that, and staying human.
Right.
And the joy and positivity that comes from, say, the monthly dance events, or
right. Yeah, love and
bi-weekly.
Happiness, or what as he calls it. You're right.
It's the same concept of bringing people together, shoulder to shoulder, that might not necessarily, inhabit the same space, and having this a collective experience of joy that in
Right.
it of itself is kind of an act of resistance, because there's so much horrible stuff going on.
Right. And that human connection.
That
In-person
human
human connection.
Alongside all the work that he's doing directly with other community leaders in local and state government, all this crossover. And the way I thought we could approach it is connecting some of these big macro issues, say federal funding cuts. How is the arts community responding to that? How is Santa Fe as a city responding to that? It's a portrait of the arts community, particularly, the community composed primarily of people of color who, are some of the vulnerable populations, who are going to experience the effects of these funding cuts, of, immigration policies, their families. Like, it's this lens to view what's going on in the country in a very direct and personal way.
Yeah.
Because you have to find that anchor, like the central, like who are the characters?
Yeah.
Like Rashawn.
And it gets very complicated here in Santa Fe as a important arts community, but also as the seat of state government. And how does the federal funding and the state funding and the local funding and all of those things interact? It can be very fraught and
it can be very
difficult.
fraught. It's like going to be a delicate process. There's a lot of sensitivity involved, and it's not. None of this is about like blaming or finger pointing or like let's shine a light on how dysfunctional it's government can be, and these But
ideas how to move forward and make it work.
That is how to move forward. Yeah, and like it's there's people in government, city and state, who are just as frustrated with the process and who really are trying their best. And I don't think I have to twist the story to elevate that work and not have it be a puff piece. Like, I see a lot of opportunity of like, I want it to be honest. I don't want to be a conflict of interest, but I'm like, Santa Fe is doing some exceptional work that goes against the grain of like national trends in a good way, progressive way. And so this is all going to unfold organically. I have so many ideas. Sometimes you just got to start shooting and let the story come. And that's the stage I'm at, and applying for grants. And
wonderful. Sounds like it'll be a long and exciting process.
Yeah, this is going to probably be a long project. I think it has to be. Yeah.
Well, we should finish up. We've expended all our available time. Thank you, Kaela, so much for coming out here to my living room and chatting with me. And you can find more about Kaela on social media or on her website, which is mountainmovermedia.com. The Cara Romero documentary piece is available to watch on PBS.
Yeah, the PBS video app. If you just Google Cara Romero Following the Light, it should come right up.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.